Rome, an empire that stretched across continents, a civilization that defined the world for centuries. But in the heart of this mighty empire, there was one emperor who stands apart from the rest. A ruler so controversial, so unpredictable, that his name would echo through history forever. Nero, the Emperor of Shadows. His reign was marked by decadence, tragedy, and madness, and the truth of his rule remains as elusive as the flames that ravaged the city he once ruled. Was he a tyrant, a visionary, or something far darker? In this story, we dive deep into the life of the infamous Nero. From his rise to power to his spectacular downfall, we'll explore the choices, the chaos, and the contradictions that made him one of Rome's most enigmatic figures. But be warned, this is not the history you've been taught. This is the true tale of Nero, as you've never heard it before. Stick with us until the end and uncover the secrets that history tried to bury. Title: Nero, the Emperor of Shadows. The rise of Nero. In the grand annals of Roman history, few figures loom as controversially as Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. To some, he was a patron of the arts and a visionary leader. To others, a tyrant whose reign descended into chaos and cruelty. But behind the marble statues and gilded frescoes, Nero's story is one of ambition, betrayal, and a descent into darkness that shook the Roman Empire to its core. The making of an emperor. Nero was born on December 15, 37 AD, under the name Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus. His lineage was as illustrious as it was turbulent. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, was a member of the powerful Julio-Claudian dynasty, while his father, Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus, had a reputation for cruelty and excess. At just 2 years old, Nero's life took a dramatic turn when his father died, leaving Agrippina to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics. Agrippina was no ordinary widow. She was ambitious, cunning, and unrelenting in her quest for power. She soon remarried Emperor Claudius, positioning Nero as a potential heir to the throne. To secure Nero's place, Agrippina orchestrated a series of political maneuvers, eliminating rivals and ensuring her son's adoption by Claudius. When Nero was 16, Claudius died, under suspicious circumstances. Many whispered that Agrippina had poisoned him to elevate Nero to the throne. Nero's ascension. In 54 AD, Nero was proclaimed emperor, the youngest in Roman history at just 17 years old. Initially, his reign showed promise. Guided by the philosopher Seneca and the Praetorian prefect Burrus, Nero implemented reforms to reduce taxes, improve public infrastructure, and champion the arts. But the shadows of Agrippina's influence loomed large. The mother who had worked tirelessly to place her son on the throne now sought to control him. Their relationship, once close, soured as Nero grew into his role. Agrippina's interference in state matters and her domineering presence became a source of tension. In 59 AD, this tension reached a breaking point. Fearing his mother's growing power, Nero orchestrated her assassination. According to accounts, he invited Agrippina to a banquet on a boat rigged to collapse. When the plot failed, Nero resorted to more direct means, ordering soldiers to kill her. Her final words, as recorded by historians, were chilling. "Strike here, where the emperor was born." The descent into tyranny. With Agrippina gone, Nero's reign took a darker turn. Freed from his mother's influence, he indulged in his passions for music, theater, and extravagant displays of wealth. While the Roman elite viewed these pursuits as unbecoming of an emperor, Nero reveled in his self-proclaimed artistic genius. However, Nero's obsession with his image came at a cost. His lavish spending drained the empire's treasury, and his paranoia led to a wave of purges. Senators, generals, and even close allies fell victim to accusations of treason. The executions were swift and brutal, cementing Nero's reputation as a tyrant. The Great Fire of Rome. In 64 AD, disaster struck. A fire broke out in the heart of Rome, raging for 6 days and destroying much of the city. The devastation was unprecedented, leaving thousands homeless and turning once thriving districts into smoldering ruins. While some accounts suggest the fire was accidental, others claimed Nero himself was responsible. seeking to clear land for his grandiose architectural ambitions. The most infamous rumor alleged that Nero played his lyre as Rome burned, though historians debate the accuracy of this claim. In the aftermath, Nero faced mounting public anger. To deflect blame, he scapegoated the Christian community, accusing them of arson. This marked the beginning of widespread persecution, with Christians subjected to brutal executions in arenas and public spectacles. A vision of grandeur. Despite the chaos, Nero pursued his dream of transforming Rome into a city befitting his legacy. He commissioned the construction of the Domus Aurea, or Golden House, a sprawling palace adorned with gold, precious stones, and elaborate frescoes. The centerpiece was a colossal statue of Nero himself, a testament to his ego and ambition. But Nero's grand projects alienated the Senate and the Roman elite, who viewed him as a reckless despot squandering the empire's resources. The fall of an emperor. By 68 AD, Nero's reign was crumbling. Revolts erupted across the empire, fueled by discontent over heavy taxation and Nero's mismanagement. The Senate declared him a public enemy, and the Praetorian Guard, once his loyal protectors, turned against him. Abandoned and desperate, Nero fled Rome. According to legend, his final words before taking his own life were, "What an artist dies in me." With his death, the Julio-Claudian dynasty came to an end, plunging Rome into a year of political chaos known as the Year of the Four Emperors. The legacy of Nero. Nero's reign is one of history's great paradoxes. While his artistic pursuits and public works left a lasting cultural impact, his tyranny and excesses overshadowed his contributions. To this day, historians debate whether Nero was a misunderstood visionary or a madman consumed by power. The Great Fire of Rome, the persecution of Christians, and the Domus Aurea stand as enduring symbols of his rule. Yet, the Roman people's complex relationship with Nero, ranging from adoration to hatred, offers insight into the volatile dynamics of power and leadership. The fall of Nero's empire. The golden vision turns dark. In the years following the Great Fire of Rome, Nero's reputation was fragile, teetering on the edge of collapse. While the Domus Aurea glittered with opulence, the resentment of Rome's populace simmered beneath the surface. The colossal expenses required for Nero's architectural dreams had drained the empire's coffers, leading to increased taxes and forced tributes from provinces. Many of Nero's subjects, especially those in the provinces, felt the weight of his ambitions. Governors and local leaders complained of the emperor's excessive demands. In Gaul, Hispania, and even the distant reaches of Britannia, murmurs of rebellion began to echo through the ranks of the Roman legions. To appease his critics and secure his legacy, Nero turned to grand displays of generosity. He organized lavish games, spectacles, and public feasts, declaring them gifts to the people. Yet, for many, these gestures felt hollow, a distraction from the deeper issues plaguing the empire. Paranoia and persecution. As Nero's popularity waned, his paranoia grew. He became convinced that conspiracies against him were everywhere. His once trusted advisors, Seneca and Burrus, found themselves under suspicion. Burrus's sudden death, possibly by poison, left Seneca vulnerable to the emperor's erratic wrath. In 65 AD, Nero's fears culminated in the infamous Pisonian conspiracy. Led by Gaius Calpurnius Piso, a prominent senator, the plot sought to overthrow Nero and restore stability to the empire. When the conspiracy was uncovered, Nero's response was swift and brutal. Dozens of senators, knights, and even members of his inner circle were arrested and executed. Seneca, Nero's former tutor, was forced to take his own life. A grim end for the philosopher who had once guided the young emperor with ideals of virtue and wisdom. The deaths of so many prominent figures sent shockwaves through Rome, cementing Nero's image as a tyrant consumed by fear. The revolts begin. While Nero's purges secured his position in Rome, unrest brewed across the empire. The first spark ignited in Britannia, where Queen Boudica of the Iceni led a ferocious uprising against Roman rule. Though Nero's generals ultimately crushed the rebellion, the revolt exposed the vulnerabilities of the empire under his reign. In 68 AD, the embers of rebellion flared into open revolt in Gaul. Gaius Julius Vindex, a governor and former ally of Nero, denounced the emperor as a despot unfit to rule. Vindex called for the Senate to declare Nero a public enemy and rallied legions to his cause. Nero's response was characteristic of his arrogance. He dismissed Vindex as a minor threat, more concerned with his artistic performances in Greece than the rebellion unfolding in his empire. His neglect proved costly. The collapse of loyalty. As news of Vindex's rebellion spread, other provinces followed suit. In Hispania, Servius Sulpicius Galba, a veteran general and governor, declared his allegiance to the Senate and joined the revolt against Nero. The Praetorian Guard, the elite force sworn to protect the emperor, began to waver in their loyalty. Nero's neglect of military matters and his perceived disdain for the traditional values of Rome alienated the soldiers who had once fought for him. In Rome, the Senate debated its next move. With Nero absent and the empire in turmoil, many senators saw an opportunity to restore their power. On June 8, 68 AD, the Senate officially declared Nero an enemy of the state, a shocking act that marked the beginning of the end for the emperor. The last days of Nero. When news of the Senate's declaration reached Nero, he was performing in Naples, showcasing his lyre-playing and dramatic talents. The announcement shattered his confidence. Abandoned by his allies and advisors, Nero fled to the countryside, seeking refuge in a villa owned by one of his few remaining supporters. There, the once mighty emperor found himself utterly alone. The Praetorian Guard, swayed by promises of wealth and power from Galba, had betrayed him. The Senate issued orders for his arrest, and Nero knew that his capture would mean public humiliation and execution. On the morning of June 9, 68 AD, Nero received word that soldiers were closing in. Desperate to avoid the disgrace of being paraded through the streets of Rome, he ordered his secretary, Epaphroditos, to assist him in taking his own life. His final words, according to historical accounts, were a lament for his lost greatness. "What an artist dies in me! The year of the 4 emperors." Nero's death plunged the Roman Empire into chaos. With no clear successor, rival factions vied for control, leading to a turbulent period known as the Year of the 4 Emperors. Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian all claimed the throne in rapid succession, each facing challenges from within and beyond Rome's borders. For many Romans, Nero's fall was both a relief and a warning. His reign, marked by grandiosity and brutality, underscored the fragility of imperial power. The Julio-Claudian dynasty, which had ruled Rome for nearly a century, came to an abrupt and ignoble end. Nero's legacy. Nero's legacy remains a subject of fierce debate among historians. Was he a misunderstood visionary whose artistic ambitions clashed with Rome's conservative elite? Or was he a tyrant whose excesses brought the empire to the brink of collapse? Modern scholarship has sought to separate fact from fiction, examining the biases of ancient sources like Tacitus, Suetonius, and Cassius Dio. While these historians portrayed Nero as a monstrous figure, their accounts were shaped by political and cultural agendas. Nero's patronage of the arts, his contributions to Roman architecture, and his reforms, however overshadowed by his excesses, reflect a more complex ruler than the caricature of a mad tyrant. The collapse of power. The Year of the 4 Emperors. The death of Nero did not bring peace to the empire. On the contrary, it unleashed a storm that would shake Rome to its very core. The political instability that followed was unlike anything the empire had seen in over a century. Nero's fall sparked what would come to be known as the Year of the 4 Emperors, a period of ruthless struggle, betrayal, and shifting alliances that saw the throne change hands 4 times in just a single year. In the aftermath of Nero's death, chaos reigned. With no clear successor, the Senate, the Praetorian Guard, and the legions each vied for control of the empire. But it was not simply about power. Each contender for the throne had to navigate a treacherous landscape where personal ambition collided with Rome's fractured political realities. The first to seize power was Galba, the governor of Hispania. With the support of the Senate, he declared himself emperor, believing that he could restore order to the empire. His reign, however, was short and tumultuous. Galba quickly alienated the army with his stinginess and his failure to reward the soldiers who had helped him take power. His refusal to pay the Praetorian Guard their promised bonuses ignited a rebellion. The army marched on Rome, and in January 69 AD, Galba was assassinated in the Senate. In the wake of Galba's death, the Praetorian Guard backed Otho, one of Galba's former supporters, as the new emperor. Otho, eager to maintain power, promised rewards to the Guard, but his reign was equally fragile. The legions in Gaul, loyal to a man named Vitellius, refused to recognize Otho as emperor. Vitellius, a military commander known for his debauchery and extravagance, marched south with his troops. Within months, Otho, unable to compete with the might of Vitellius' forces, took his own life. For a brief moment, it seemed that Vitellius would secure the empire for himself. Yet his reign was not meant to last. In the east, a new contender emerged: Vespasian, the commander of the Roman legions in Judea, who had led successful campaigns against the Jewish rebellion. Vespasian's forces had begun to sweep across the empire, and Vitellius' soldiers, worn out by their constant battles, were unable to stop him. In December 69 AD, Vitellius was captured and executed, marking the end of the year of the four emperors. Vespasian, the only man to emerge victorious from the chaos, was declared emperor. His rise to power brought much-needed stability to the empire, but the scars of Nero's reign would remain. The end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Nero's death signaled the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, the family that had ruled Rome for nearly a century. From Augustus to Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero, the family had seen its rise to unparalleled power, but also its profound fall from grace. Each emperor had left his mark on Rome, but Nero's reign had left a stain that would be difficult to wash away. In many ways, Nero's downfall was inevitable. His combination of erratic behavior, artistic ambitions, and disregard for the traditional values of Rome alienated the very people who had once supported him. The Senate, the military, and even the Roman people had turned against him. But what truly sealed his fate was his failure to govern with wisdom and foresight. By the time of his death, Nero had alienated almost every major faction in the empire. The military, which had once been a pillar of support, had grown disillusioned by his neglect of their needs. The Senate, which had once served as a tool of imperial power, had become a political battlefield. The people of Rome, exhausted by his extravagance, had lost their faith in him. A bitter controversy. Nero's legacy has been the subject of endless debate among historians. Was he a madman who indulged in cruelty and debauchery, or was he a misunderstood ruler whose artistic ambitions collided with the realities of imperial governance? The ancient sources, most of which were written by those who had no love for the emperor, paint a picture of a tyrant driven by excesses and paranoia. But there is another side to Nero's reign that cannot be ignored. One of Nero's most enduring legacies was his patronage of the arts. He saw himself as an artist, a poet, a musician, and a performer, believing that the emperor should not only be a ruler but a cultural leader as well. His love of theater and music led him to build the famous Domus Aurea, a palace that was the epitome of Roman extravagance and architectural brilliance. He was also known for his lavish public performances, where he would sing, recite poetry, and play the lyre. To the people of Rome, these spectacles were a reminder of Nero's vision of a new, more artistic and cultured empire. However, these artistic ambitions were overshadowed by the darker side of his reign. Nero was notorious for his cruelty and paranoia. He had his own mother, Agrippina, murdered in order to secure his position, and he was responsible for the deaths of many others, including his first wife, Octavia. Nero's purges of political enemies, most notably in the aftermath of the Pisonian conspiracy, solidified his reputation as a tyrant. Yet, it is crucial to recognize that much of the information we have about Nero comes from sources that were hostile to him. Tacitus, Suetonius, and Dio Cassius, three of the most famous Roman historians, were writing long after Nero's death, during a time when the Julio-Claudian dynasty had been replaced by the Flavians. These historians had reasons to portray Nero in a negative light, given his association with the fallen dynasty. Nero in popular culture. Nero's death and the subsequent instability in Rome became the stuff of legend. Over the centuries, his name has been synonymous with tyranny, decadence, and cruelty. He has appeared in countless works of art, literature, and popular media, often depicted as a mad emperor who fiddled while Rome burned. In modern times, the image of Nero has evolved. Some view him as a tragic figure, a man caught between his personal artistic aspirations and the demands of ruling an empire. Others see him as a symbol of the dangers of unchecked power, a warning of what can happen when a ruler loses touch with the needs of his people. The fall of Rome. Nero's reign, while marked by his personal excesses, also offers valuable lessons about the fragility of empire. The Roman Empire was vast, spanning continents and cultures, but it was also deeply dependent on strong leadership. Nero's failure to maintain control over the military and the Senate revealed the vulnerability of Rome's political structure. The rapid succession of emperors in 69 AD demonstrated the empire's instability in the face of internal strife. But this period of turmoil also marked the beginning of the end for the Julio-Claudian dynasty. The reforms of Vespasian and his sons, Titus and Domitian, would eventually stabilize the empire, but they would also set the stage for a new era of absolute rule under the Flavian dynasty. Nero's legacy, therefore, is a complex one. He was both a product of his time and a ruler who pushed the boundaries of Roman expectations. His life and death continue to captivate historians and the public alike, serving as a reminder of the delicate balance between power, ambition, and responsibility. The legacy of Nero, the fall of the empire's heart. Nero's death may have shattered the Julio-Claudian dynasty, but it left in its wake a deeper, more profound question. What happens when a great empire loses its emperor, its figurehead, its very heart? Nero's reign had been one of excess, but also one of incredible contrasts. His artistic ambitions, his military failures, his extravagant displays of wealth, and his descent into madness. As the empire sought stability in the wake of his demise, Rome itself was in turmoil. But history would prove that Nero's shadow loomed long after his death. The year of the four emperors was over, and Vespasian emerged victorious. Yet the effects of Nero's reign, the damage it caused to Rome's political system and its image in the world, would endure for generations. Despite the eventual restoration of order under the Flavians, the scars left by Nero's rule were not so easily healed. The forgotten emperors and the death of a dynasty. When Vespasian ascended to the throne, he brought a sense of military discipline and stability that had been lacking under Nero. His reign marked the beginning of the Flavian dynasty, a period that would secure the empire's borders and begin the monumental construction of landmarks like the Colosseum. Vespasian's sons, Titus and Domitian, would continue his work, solidifying the power of the Roman Empire. But what of the empire's heart, its culture, its soul? In the wake of Nero's extravagant reign, Rome needed more than just political stability. It needed a cultural resurgence. The Senate had once been a prestigious body that held sway over the affairs of the empire, but under Nero, it had become nothing more than a tool of imperial power, sidelined by Nero's personal whims. The artist king who had once envisioned an empire in which Rome's grandeur was matched only by its artistic excellence had left behind a fractured political landscape, struggling to redefine its identity. Despite the restoration of order, the people of Rome could not easily forget the man who had burned a portion of their city and murdered his own family in a brutal quest for power. Nero's controversial death left the people with a bitter taste, and even though the empire moved on, the legend of Nero as a tyrant endured. His name became synonymous with cruelty, decadence, and neglect. But as with many historical figures, the true legacy of Nero cannot be measured simply by the stories of his brutality. It was also shaped by his artistic passions, his vision of a Rome that was grander, more cultured, and more celebrated than any other empire before it. In this sense, Nero was a man ahead of his time, but one whose ambition led him into dangerous territory. Nero's artistic vision, the emperor as a poet. One of the aspects of Nero's reign that often gets overshadowed by his cruelty was his obsession with art. Nero believed that the emperor should not only be a political leader but also a cultural one. This ambition led him to commission works of architecture, theater, and public performances unlike anything the empire had seen before. His most famous artistic project was the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a sprawling palace complex that covered much of central Rome. The palace, designed by the architect Severus, was a testament to Nero's vision of imperial grandeur. The Domus Aurea was filled with luxurious gardens, enormous pools, and elaborate rooms adorned with precious metals and frescoes. It was a structure so opulent that it seemed to defy the conventional sense of Roman grandeur, pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable and possible at the time. Nero himself, however, took this obsession even further. He was not content with merely being a patron of the arts. He wanted to be the artist. He famously took to the stage, performing as a poet, musician, and actor. To the aristocracy, this was seen as a scandal. But for Nero, these performances were an essential part of his vision for Rome. He believed that by participating in the arts himself, he could set an example for the people of Rome, showing them that their emperor was not just a ruler, but a creator. Yet, in the eyes of many Romans, Nero's artistic pursuits were a symptom of his delusion. The idea of an emperor performing in public, subjecting himself to the scrutiny of the people, was considered beneath the dignity of the office. This tension between Nero's artistic aspirations and the expectations of his role as emperor fueled the resentment that would ultimately lead to his downfall. The persecution and the Great Fire of Rome. No event in Nero's reign has been more hotly debated than the infamous Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. The fire, which lasted for 6 days, destroyed much of the city, leaving thousands homeless and causing immense suffering. Ancient historians, particularly Tacitus, suggest that Nero was either complicit in starting the fire or, at the very least, allowed it to burn unchecked while he retreated to his private villa. But the true question remains: was Nero truly responsible for the fire, or did he use it as an opportunity to rebuild Rome in his own vision? Historical sources are divided, but the fire's aftermath created a perfect opportunity for Nero to push through his grand architectural plans, notably the construction of the Domus Aurea. Whether or not Nero had a direct hand in starting the fire is still debated by scholars, but one thing is clear: he did use the disaster to further his own interests. His decision to blame the Christians, whom he saw as a convenient scapegoat, sparked one of the first large-scale persecutions of the Christian community in Rome, further cementing his reputation as a tyrant. The final days of Nero, the end of an era. By 68 AD, the weight of Nero's excesses, his cruelty, and his inability to maintain the loyalty of his military had come to a head. When the revolts spread throughout the empire and the Senate declared Nero a public enemy, he fled Rome. Alone and destitute, Nero's once great empire crumbled beneath his feet. His final days were marked by paranoia and fear. Legend tells of Nero wandering the streets, desperately seeking refuge, as his own guards turned on him. Ultimately, he was cornered in a villa outside Rome and took his own life. His death marked the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty and left Rome with a power vacuum that would take the empire years to fill. The aftermath and the myth of Nero. In the aftermath of his death, the myth of Nero only grew. To his contemporaries, he was a tyrant, a monster who had brought the empire to the brink of collapse. But in the centuries that followed, Nero became a symbol of excess and decadence, a figure who embodied the dangers of unchecked power. Yet, in a strange twist of fate, Nero's artistic vision, his belief in the emperor as an artist, would influence future rulers. His grandiose architectural projects, especially the Domus Aurea, were echoed in later imperial constructions, and his obsession with the arts became a theme in the Renaissance, where he was celebrated as a tragic, misunderstood genius. But the truth of Nero's reign lies somewhere in between the extremes of myth and reality. He was neither the mad tyrant portrayed by ancient historians nor the misunderstood artistic soul some modern scholars wish to believe him to be. Rather, he was a product of his time, caught between the aspirations of a visionary ruler and the harsh realities of imperial politics.